This is block A3, and we are starting with our nationalism group. Nationalism group, please come forward.
Where do they go? Do they just stand there? Alright. This is awkward.
Good luck.
Nationalism team, you may begin.
When it comes to World War I, the sources of tension and causes seem endless. However, whether being the underlying cause of Franz Ferdinand's assassination or being the source of rising militarism between European powers, from almost every conceivable perspective of the war, nationalism is at its root. Nationalism proved to be the main underlying cause of World War I, not only because of how it caused a necessity for independence in the Balkans, but also how it created competition and tension between European nations, specifically Great Britain and Germany. Serbian nationalism became the main source of tension and intra-state conflict within Austria-Hungary and the Balkans. Gavrilo Princip, one of the Archduke's assassins, explains that he is a Yugoslav nationalist, and he does not care what form of state, but all the Slavs must be free from Austria. The sentiment Princip displays here is the same exact nationalistic sentiment within most of the Slavs during World War I, eventually leading to tension in the Balkans and resulting in the spark that caused the war, Archduke Franz Ferdinand's assassination. Furthermore, nationalism provided Germany with the perfect excuse to wage war on European powers around them. Supplying Austria-Hungary with a blank check, Germany entered the war after Russia joined the conflict, a move the Germans knew was inevitable. When the Russian ambassador confirmed with the German ambassador prior to the conflict, he stated that you could have prevented the war with Austria-Hungary with one word, but you didn't want to. In a domino effect, Serbian nationalism led to war with Austria-Hungary, which led to war with Russia, eventually leading to Germany joining the conflict, thus proving once more that nationalism was the main cause of World War I. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, 150.
Oh, sorry.
1 second. Okay, ready for our next speaker? You may begin.
19th century Europe was peaceful, with no major conflicts between its four significant powers. However, the turn of the 20th century meant that Britain was now a colonial empire and the Germans were developing militaristically. Behind every event, however, was nationalism. Nationalism was the underlying cause of World War I because of the competition it created between European powers, which led to increased militaristic and imperialistic development in Europe, creating overconfidence about war and conflict between nations. To begin with, British nationalism was a defining cause for World War I. In Britain, James Thomson often sang to warriors, "Rule Britannia, rule the waves, the Britons shall never be slaves." These nationalistic ideas of warriors needing to protect Britain from enslavement exemplified their imperialism and led to European competition for power. For example, Germany's von Bülow stated, "We, the Germans, don't ever want to become the slaves of humanity. There is no welfare for us without a strong army." Britain's nationalistic colonial movement led to increasing other nations' nationalistic intentions to defend themselves and expand for more power within the world. This led to strong militaristic abilities being developed, and without having experienced conflict for a century, the Europeans only became more overconfident about waging war instead of peace. Moreover, competition for national supremacy was a leading cause of tension between nations. In fact, according to the book International Relations, in 1900 Germany could spend on its army. This worried Britain. This ongoing competition between Britain and Germany about militaristic development motivated aggression between the two nations, with nationalism on both sides intensifying their rivalry and hunger for European supremacy. With this, it was nationalism which led to European powers such as Britain and Germany to compete for militaristic development, forming powerful opposition that welcomed conflict instead of evading it.
Great. Let's hold our applause, so that was like 155-ish. Let's hold our applause till the end of the group. Andrew, you may begin.
Although some may state that imperialism caused conflict for the uprising of World War I, it was eventually nationalism that incited the war. It is true that countries in Europe were definitely busy taking over colonies in Asia and Africa, which in turn ended up breaking out great tension in the continent. This conflict contributed to some extent to World War I, but it was not the most decisive factor. These kinds of conflicts between countries often happen, but they do not necessarily always lead to a war. What we should look here is what actually drove to the war. Once again, the nationalistic spirit which grew in Germany played a great role in the cause of World War I. In the race of getting colonies, Germany was clearly not in the lead. Britain, France, and Germany had two main crises in Morocco in 1905 and 1911. Sensing the scheme of Germany building an empire in Morocco, Britain and France held conferences to announce that these two countries were major powers. At the same time, they humiliated Kaiser of Germany, stating that it had no right in Africa. Filled with great rage, Germany was running feature articles condemning the alliance of Britain and France. Then, it devoted to simmering the national pride of the people. According to the International Encyclopedia article, Germans were filled with nationalism and patriotism that they were shouting revenge everywhere on the street, and that it was holding on colonial rule upon their power and significance that drove them to imperialism. In other words, imperialism is definitely one of the most important factors, but it only caused a conflict between Britain, France, and Germany. Then, those conflicts eventually led to nationalism, which made those countries want to revenge each other and win against each other. Therefore, imperialism only contributed to some extent to World War I, but nationalism was the one that actually drove to the actual World War I.
I missed starting the timer, so I don't know. It was fine. Okay. Sophia, you may begin.
Nationalism was the overlying cause of World War I because it helped inspire the pride and patriotism in people like Gavrilo Princip and organizations like the Black Hand to commit devastating acts, including the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in an attempt to instate their belief of superiority. These outbursts of violence led to a series of competitions between nations who were constantly trying to establish dominance over one another. Although the opposition claims that imperialism caused conflict because of how it inspired nations, Serbia reverted to nationalistic behavior in order to achieve their freedom and independence from the Austro-Hungarian rule. It was, in fact, the arrogance and pride that governors held in themselves and their land that drove them to expand and boast their power by helping colonies. So why is nationalism so important? What makes it the overlying cause of World War I? One reason is the pressure to show patriotism for their country. It came from nationalism and propaganda, which pressured young men into joining the army. And as one country mobilized their army, another would soon follow, trying to prove that they were superior. A great example of this is when Russia mobilized their army, despite Germany telling them to stop, which caused Germany to mobilize their army and declare war on Russia. Other countries tried to gain an advantage on others by advancing their military weaponry, like the invention of automatic machine guns and chemical weapons, or the colonization of other states, like the Schlieffen Plan. And although it failed, it contributed to the tension between European powers. All of this competition and intimidation, which came from nationalism, eventually led to the First World War.
Okay, great. Let's acknowledge the whole nationalism group. Wait, I have to stop the video.
Can you speak to the group